She never screamed, not when he hit her, not even when he tore her shirt and told her she was just a thing he could use and throw away. The only sound that left her lips that night was a whisper, one word. Please. Clayton stared at her like she wasn't even human, like she was something dirty clinging to his boot. He didn't care that she begged, he didn't care that she bled, and when he was done breaking her, he ordered her dead. He looked her in the eyes and said the words like it was nothing. Take her out back, tie her up, make sure she don't come back up if she hits water. It wasn't rage, it wasn't passion. It was cold, clean, empty. Ellie was just a housemaid. She swept floors, she folded sheets, she said no once, and that was all it took. Clayton was the sheriff's son, the kind of man no one says no to twice. And now, tied at the wrists, half naked, clothes torn, mouth swollen, skin raw with bruises, Ellie sat in the back of a wagon, heading to her grave. Her hands shook, not from fear, from shame. The man driving the wagon kept glancing at her, Tommy, one of Clayton's boys. But his hands weren't steady either. He didn't speak, not until the wagon stopped on a dirt path beside a quiet stream. He got down, lit a cigarette, and for a minute just stood there. Then he walked around, opened the back, and stared at her. "You weren't supposed to look me in the eyes," he muttered. Ellie didn't say a word. She just stared straight through him. "You know what they said I got to do." He flicked ash onto the dirt. "That if I don't, I'm next." His voice cracked. Something in it broke. "You didn't deserve this." Tommy looked up at the sky like maybe it could answer for what men did. Then he cursed under his breath, pulled out a knife, and started cutting the ropes. "You walk north. Don't stop. Don't look back. Maybe someone finds you, maybe not." Ellie didn't move. Her legs barely worked, but her eyes were burning. By the time Tommy climbed back onto the wagon and rode off that she was already crawling through the dry grass somewhere beyond the ridge. A ranch stood, old, quiet, forgotten by time. That's where Jonas lived. A man who had already buried everything he ever loved. At dawn, he stepped outside, coffee in hand, and he saw her. A girl with torn clothes, bare feet, blood on her thighs, bruises on her face, and nothing left to give. But still breathing, he didn't run, didn't shout. He just walked up slow. And when she looked up at him, barely able to hold her head, she whispered the only thing that came to mind. "Please don't judge me." Jonas stared at her, not with pity, not with fear, but with something else, something heavy. He reached out his hand. That was the moment everything changed. But what if the man sent to kill you is the only one who ever showed you kindness? Jonas did not ask question. He just lifted Ellie into his arms, carried her past the broken fence, and through the old door of a cabin that had not felt life in years. The place smelled of dust and wood smoke. One bed sat against the wall. The blanket was faded but still neatly folded. It had belonged to his wife, and Jonas had not touched it since the fever took her. That night he laid Ellie there. He moved slow, careful, like if he shifted too fast, she might shatter into pieces. She didn't fight him, she didn't cry. She just stared at the ceiling like she was still tied to that wagon. Jonas left water, bread, and a clean cloth. He sat outside on the porch, staring at the dark hills, wondering why his chest felt heavy for the first time in 10 years. By morning the bread was gone, the bucket half empty, and he noticed the mirror above the washstand had been covered with a towel. Ellie did not want to see her own face. For days, she stayed quiet. Her eyes followed Jonas when he came in with food, but she never spoke. Sometimes he caught her holding a needle and a scrap of fabric, not sewing, just holding it, like the memory of how to stitch was the only part of her she still owned. One evening, she finally spoke. Her voice was rough, thin, but steady enough. "If I still remember how to sew," she said, "does that mean I'm still a person?" Jonas had no answer. He just stood there staring at the floor until she turned away. The truth came out in pieces after that, a name here, a place there. By the third night, Jonas had enough of the puzzle to see the picture. Ellie had been working in the sheriff's house. The man's son, Clayton, had set his eyes on her. When she said no, he turned cruel. When she threatened to speak, he turned deadly. Clayton ordered her to vanish. Jonas felt his stomach twist. The law of the land was the sheriff, and the law was already lost. But something deeper burned in him now, a fire he thought had gone out with his wife. This girl was not his blood, but leaving her to silence meant becoming part of the same cruelty that had already nearly destroyed her that night. As Jonas sat on the porch again, he realized something. This wasn't just about keeping her alive. It was about deciding if he still believed in anything at all. And while Jonas wrestled with his thoughts, Clayton was already asking questions. Word had reached him that a girl matching Ellie's description had been seen near the hills. So what happens when the son of the law discovers the truth he thought he buried is still breathing? Clayton was not a man to let go. When whispers reached him that the girl he left for dead was breathing again, his blood boiled hotter than the Arizona sun. He called for Tommy, the boy who had driven that wagon, the boy he trusted to do the job. When Tommy walked into the saloon, Clayton's fist was waiting. One punch split his lip, the next doubled him over. Clayton grabbed him by the collar, shoved his face against the bar, and hissed, "You think you can make a fool of me?" Tommy tasted blood. Then he tasted shame, and he heard the threat clear as day. "You put her down or I put you down. Simple as that." The beating went on until Tommy could barely stand. Clayton left him on the floor, broken in body and spirit, but with one order burned into his skull. Finish the job. That night, Tommy rode out the same hills, the same ranch, but this time the weight was heavier. Not just the gun in his holster, but the choice that came with it. Ellie was sitting on the porch when she saw him. Her face froze, but her eyes told the story. She knew why he had come. Tommy got off the horse, hands shaking. He pulled the gun, but couldn't point it straight. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "They said I had to. They said if I don't, I'm done." Ellie stood barefoot, trembling, but tall enough to meet his eyes. "You already had your chance," she whispered, "and you chose to let me live." Tommy dropped to his knees, the gun falling in the dirt. Tears cut through the blood and dust on his face. "I can't do it," he said. "I couldn't then. I can't now." That's when Jonas stepped out from the cabin, rifle in his hands, calm, steady. His voice cut through the night air like a blade. "Then it's time you pick a side, boy. You stand with her or you die with him." The silence was thick enough to choke on. Tommy looked at Ellie, then at Jonas, then at the sky, and for the first time in his life, he chose to stand. From that moment, it was no longer secret. It was a fight waiting to happen. Ellie, Jonas, and Tommy against Clayton, against the law itself, and against the fear that ruled the town. Now, before we ride further, let me ask you something. Do you believe in giving a man like Tommy a second chance? If you want to see how this battle plays out, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's free. It keeps this fire burning, and it means you won't miss when the truth finally explodes under the hot sun. Because in the next part, they don't just defend a cabin. They drag the devil's son right into the heart of town in front of every eye that ever looked away. Morning came hard and hot. Jonah saddled the mule, checked his rifle, and looked at Tommy. The boy's lip was still split, his eyes swollen from Clayton's beating, but his jaw was set. He had chosen his side. Ellie stood on the porch, her hands shook, but not from fear, from knowing what came next. They were not going to hide anymore. The three of them rode into town together, not at night, not in secret, but in daylight when every man, woman, and child was out on Main Street. Clayton was laughing with his friends outside the saloon when the sound of hooves cut through the chatter. Heads turned, Poa voices hushed, then silence. Jonas dismounted first. Tommy followed, dragging a man behind him, Jack, Clayton's other boy, beaten and tied, his mouth stuffed with cloth. When Clayton saw Ellie climb down, still bruised but standing tall, the smile drained from his face, Jonah spoke clear and steady, loud enough for the whole street to hear. This girl was left for dead by him. He pointed straight at Clayton. Gasps rolled through the crowd. Ellie's knees trembled, but she stepped forward. She pulled the towel from her arm, showing rope burns cut deep into her skin. She worked in the sheriff's house. Jonah said. She said no once, and this is what it cost her. Clayton barked out a laugh, tried to wave it off, but Tommy cut him short. He threw a folded piece of cloth onto the dirt. It was Ellie's torn dress, stained with blood. I was there. Tommy shouted. I was told to kill her, and I couldn't because I knew the truth. The crowd shifted. Men who had raised glasses with Clayton now took a step back. Women clutched their children tighter, and for the first time Clayton looked small. The sheriff pushed his way through, face red, eyes darting. Son, he growled, but the people were already murmuring, monster devil, not fit to wear a badge. No one lifted a gun. They didn't need to. Clayton was already finished. The lawman's son was no law at all. The sheriff's hand shook as he pulled the irons from his belt. He looked at his boy one last time, then snapped the cuffs shut. Clayton cursed, kicked, screamed, but no one listened anymore. The crowd had turned. Ellie's eyes filled, not with tears, but with something harder, something stronger. She was no longer the girl tied to a post. She was the woman who stood in the center of town and made the truth louder than fear. But that was not the end, because when a man like Clayton falls, the dust never settles easy. So what happens when the people who finally find their voice must decide how to live with it? When the sheriff snapped those irons shut, the street in Tombstone changed. It was not the gunfight some expected. Till it was not blood running through the dust, it was something quieter, and sometimes quiet is louder than thunder. The people went back to their homes. The saloon doors swung closed, but the memory of what they saw stayed. They had watched a girl once treated like nothing stand tall. They had watched a boy once branded as a coward speak the truth, and they had watched a broken rancher carry both of them through. Back at the cabin, the air felt different. Ellie did not cover the mirror anymore. She left it open, and when she passed by, she did not look away. She planted herbs in the dirt behind the house. She stitched Jonas's old shirts until they looked new again. She laughed once, and the sound startled even her. Tommy stayed close, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The guilt he carried turned into something else, a promise to never turn his back again, and Jonas, he found himself sitting on that porch watching them, feeling something he had not felt since the day his wife left this world. Family, not by blood, not by law, but by choice. The West was not built by men who carried pistols. It was built by people who chose to keep someone else alive long enough to heal. Jonas kept Ellie alive. Ellie gave Tommy a reason to stand, and Tommy gave them both a reminder that even a man with blood on his hands can choose better the second time around. So, what about you? Do you believe a broken man can be remade? Do you believe a woman who was nearly erased can rise again? Do you believe a stranger can be the family you never knew you needed? Because that is the lesson here. Sometimes it's not about walking away. Sometimes it is about staying when it would be easier to leave. Sometimes it is about carrying the weight together until it feels lighter. And maybe that is why stories like this still matter, because even in a world of dust and blood, kindness can take root. It can grow where no one expects it. It can turn a forgotten cabin into a home again. Now, if this story touched something in you, take a second to like this video. It costs nothing, but it helps more than you know. And if you want to ride with us into the next story, make sure you subscribe, because there are more tales out here waiting under the sun where grit and heart meet. So I will leave you with one last question. What would you do if the choice was yours? Would you walk away, or would you stay and carry the weight with someone who needs